I remember my first trips to the library, oddly enough, accompanied by my father. The library was always combined, in my mind anyway, with a visit to the barber. And in my memory, this would nearly always be in the dark and the cold, and involving a drive through the country. This would be to Kirkham, Lancashire, in the early 1960s. The library floor was linoleum, and it smelt of linoleum, and I think possibly even of cigarettes. The lino was dimpled with the impressions of what must have been thousands of ladies' high heels. Ivanhoe, with Roger Moore, and The Adventures of Robin Hood with Richard Green from the late 50s, were still on the black and white TV, and episodes of these gave me a taste for the historical. I can remember borrowing, taking home and enjoying 2 Henry Treece books. One was called War Dog, and this was told from the perspective of a wolfhound accompanying his master during the year leading up to the Battle of Hastings in 1066, and the other, The Bombard, about a youth's journey ultimately to the Battle of Crecy in 1346, with a prototype cannon which kept on exploding. I was packed off to boarding school in 1964, and returning to school from one of my earlier holidays, I took with me 3 Henry Treece books bought for me by my Auntie Dot, subsequently known as the Viking Saga, Viking's Dawn, The Road to Miklagard, and Viking's Sunset. And wow, did I enjoy these. I think I may have finished Viking's Dawn on the train going back to school. They related to the Viking life and eventual death of one Harold Sigurdsson. The first book tells of his first Viking voyage, complete with shipwreck, to the Hebrides as a youth, and the second recounts a long journey as a young man via Gibraltar to Constantinople and a spell with the Varangian Guard, and the third as a chieftain giving up a peaceful farming existence by a Norwegian fjord to pursue the treacherous Hakon Red Eye across the North Atlantic, via Greenland, exchanges with friendly Eskimo, and on to North America and encounters with native warriors. I found it all wildly exciting and realistic, and with sympathetic and interestingly named characters in a world where life was violent and short, but needed to be lived well and honourably, although how that honour manifested itself could be startling and bloody. Henry Treece is known principally as a writer of novels for young people. He was also a respected poet and wrote for an adult audience too. As a teenager, I started to read these when I could get hold of them. I think my school library had some. Last year, having accidentally discovered that his son, Richard Treece, played guitar in the iconic 70s pub rock band Help Yourself, I thought, hey Mike, you should reread some Henry Treece. I bought a copy of the Viking Saga trilogy and then borrowed some more books from the library store. One of these is The Golden Strangers, which is set in what could be called prehistoric Britain, or Britain just on the cusp of the Bronze Age and the arrival of the Celts. This is an extraordinary book and very dark for something written in 1956. I can't believe I read it as a teenager. It's full of interesting and interwoven, usually scary personal narratives, including a fascinating one of a female character called Rua the Fish, of the Fish People. She gets a real hard time in this book. As well as being an imaginary tour de force and story, I think the subtext of The Golden Strangers is one of one world transforming into another, the collision and challenging of the myths and belief systems that sustain human life, and the struggle for existence, the fear of the new and the inevitability of change. In the 50s, people were rebuilding after the war, living in the shadow of the bomb and wondering what new atomic world might portend for them. A bit like where we are now, as we consider the implications of the coronavirus pandemic and of how life might change. Henry Treece, whatever your age, I say, try some. He's a bit old-fashioned and not known very much these days. But if you want adventure with a subtext, Henry Treece.